Top of the morning to you. Morning tomorrow. It's going to start a little bit earlier than it did today, at least where I reside, because I'm north of the equator. And we, of course, are moving along from the longest night, which happened for we northerners when the sun ingressed tropical Capricorn and shined directly above Earth's Tropic of Capricorn, the southern bounds of the sun's journey. Since that time, the sun has been moving north. And of course, the sun will find his way to the equator of Earth at equinox time. And that's coming very soon to a theater called You, where we have equal day and equal night. Kind of. The truth is, the center of the sun, the point of the disk, is above the horizon for 12 hours and beneath the horizon for 12 hours at equinox time. But since the disk is not a dot, right? Since the sun is not a point, but rather a disk in our sky, then the sun itself spends more time above the horizon at east equinox, at Aries equinox for northern hemisphere, and less for the southern hemisphere. Regardless, it is around this time, whether you live in the north or in the south, where we get equal day and equal night. So if you, like I, reside north of the equator, the days have been growing longer and the days are about to overcome the night. Some consider this to be the resurrection of the light, and tomorrow will begin a little bit earlier than today did. However, the clocks will make it seem otherwise. We are about to spring ahead thanks to daylight losing's crime. Hence my semi-annual rant. Typically in the Gregorian month of November, I'm streaming about daylight losing's crime, and then that will happen around this time of the year as well, because it's just the weirdest thing. And of course, not every place in the world commits this crime. Even for the United States, we have two at this time that don't turn their clocks back and forward by an hour. And those states are Hawaii and Arizona. I mean, interestingly, two of the best destinations for sky gazing. So I thought we'd talk about the importance of natural time today. And this topic that I love to investigate and to discuss, which is the natural truth of time. Now, some will teach you that time is just an illusion, just a pure construct in the incarnated realms of a simulated experience or the play of it all, or who's to say, you know? And okay, but still here in the incarnated place that offers the appearance of time and space, which is the only way we could ever make moves, change, grow. Time is a very real thing, and even the time deniers, I notice, wrinkle and gray. So, what is time? Well, let's start. I think the longest period of time we'll speak about today, and we're going to look at this astronomically, is the year. Okay. I mean, we could get into great months and the great year, the precessional cycle, which is about 26,000 years long. But let's just speak about the year. And really, there's several types of years. But I want to speak about the solar year, which you can also call the tropical year. And we can look at that as Earth's orbit about the sun. My head starring as the sun in this particular picture. And this would be a very particularly interesting astronomical time, which is when Earth's North Pole leans towards the light in that moment in the most beautiful annual calendar there is, which is called the tropical zodiac. The sun is ingressing tropical Cancer. Now, this has nothing to do with the sun being uh, between Earth and the constellation of the Crab. No, not at all. But when the sun ingresses tropical Cancer, the sun shines directly above Earth's Tropic of Cancer. All right, that's the deal. That's the very elegant and beautiful Earth astronomy of the tropical zodiac. Tropikos is Greek for turnaround, because at that time, solstice, the sun stops. That's what solstice means. Stops doing what? Stops moving north because he's reached his northern bounds, the Tropic of Cancer, and then we'll start heading south. Now you can't see the Earth here, but this is the Earth at zero, or Sun entering zero Libra, and now here Earth's south pole leaning towards the light, right? So this is the Sun ingressing tropical Capricorn. I like to call that southstice. When the sun ingresses tropical Capricorn, the sun shines directly above Earth's Tropic of Capricorn, the southern bounds of the sun's journey, and then starts slowly heading north and gets to the midpoint here. This is equinox time, right? Or let's just show that this way. It's not like the tilt isn't there. It's just at this moment in equinox, the tilt is aligned with the direction of Earth's orbital journey. And when the sun ingresses Aries, or at equinox time, the sun shines directly above Earth's equator, right? Equinox, equator. So the rotational axis of Earth defines the cardinal directions. This is Santa's place right here, North Pole, points to the North Celestial Pole in the sky, right? And since there's a global north and a global south, there's also a global east and west. A little bit more difficult to perceive that, since on the surface of Earth we have different easts in New York than we do in California right now. But there is a place where we all of we earthlings are connected, and that's the center of Earth, the heart of Gaia, the place that we actually measure the placement of the sun and the planets in the signs from. All right. And like so many sacred systems of ancient wisdom traditions, the tropical zodiac is a directional device. In fact, I would suggest its signs are directionally aligned. All right. So zero Capricorn, cardinal Capricorn, cardinal south, zero Aries, cardinal east, zero Cancer, cardinal north, and zero Libra, cardinal west. That's why the Libra glyph looks like the setting sun, the ultimate image for the west. Regardless, let's just know that the tropical year, the solar year, is defined by the time it takes for the Earth to orbit the sun. It is our annual revolution, right? The so-called secondary motion. Well, what's the primary motion? And the answer is Earth's rotation, our daily rotation. The daily motion is the primary motion, right? And so year, orbit, the sun through the signs, day, rotation, the sun through the houses. And these are astronomical experiences of the light thanks to Earth's motions, right? The year and the day. And if we look at this in respect to the sun, we're speaking about the solar year of about 365.24 days, and the solar day, sunrise to the next sunrise, or sunset to the next sunset. Or really the easiest way to measure this, if you know how to do the shadow work, is midday to midday. Noon to noon, right? Kind of. What we used to call noon, which is simply the daily reach of the sun halfway in time between sunrise and sunset. The sun reaches the greatest height of the day, culminates, stops going up, starts going down. That's the sun at the MC. If you know astrology, well, that's the shortest shadow of the day, and we used to call it noon. So sunrise, noon, sunset. Well, now we call it local apparent solar noon, because noon is now identified as this thing on a clock. And clocks are amazingly convenient and super helpful, and also, in many regards, unnatural. They are approximations of nature. And when you start playing games like taking an hour away or adding an hour to the mix, this daylight losings crime shiz, you're really, really stretching the model of the clock, which is trying to help us stay connected with the sundial, which does speak for a much more natural version of time. So we want to speak about natural hours versus civil hours. Is the hour, is the minute, is the second, is that a natural thing or purely an invention? It's a really good question, I'd like to say. But you know what? Before we start dividing the day, let's divide the year into greater periods than the day itself. And so we can speak to seasons, which most of us do as divisions of the sun reaching the cardinal directions. Nobody knows it this way. Well, not some of us do, right? But these very important stations during Earth's annual orbit, where the sun is either at its southern bounds, the Tropic of Capricorn, at the middle place of the journey, the equinox, or the northern bounds, the Tropic of Cancer, or back to the equator again, right? Solstice, equinox, solstice, equator, southstice, east equinox, northstice, west equinox. You see why I call them that, right? So when the sun is aligning with the cardinal directions of Earth 4 times a year, the 4 directions, we either have a solstice or an equinox. And most of us, of course, measure seasons between those astronomical, global astronomical events. Unlike a January 1st, a solstice is a global moment in time when Earth's pole is aligned with the light. Yes? Now, the amount of time, the amount, let's say, of days between, Southstice, Capricorn solstice, and East equinox, Aries equinox, is not the same as the amount of days between East equinox, Aries equinox, and Northstice, Cancer solstice. Why? Because like all orbits, the Earth's orbital path about the light is not a circle, but rather an ellipse. And we are closest to the sun when the sun is in Capricorn, and we are furthest from the sun when the sun is in Cancer, right? So as I'm doing this thing as well, there's something about closer here, further here, right? And when the Earth is further from the sun, the Earth is moving a little bit slower in our orbital path, and therefore from our point of view, the sun is moving a little bit slower through our zodiac. So this has been a problem that the ancients have been trying to tackle since way back in the day. Why do not all seasons equal a fourth of the year? And now we know, because it is the Earth orbiting the sun in a non-circular path. Regardless, seasons, which last, about 3 months each. But what is a month? Well, some are 30 days and some 31, except for February, which is 28, except 29 every 4th year. What is that? If that's how I first learned about months, they had nothing to do with the moon. They were these things on a calendar and you flip the page, Well, look, there's something that I now call a sunth, which is a 12th of a year. Or maybe more importantly, and this is the most beautiful solar calendar that has ever been, it's called the tropical zodiac, as we follow the sun through the signs. We're not following the sun through a 12th of the year in time, again, because the sun's speed through Earth's zodiac varies throughout the year due to the elliptical orbit of Earth about the light. Sun through the signs is the sun moving through a 12th division of space, right? 30 degrees of the zodiac circle. So 30 degrees being, of course, 1/12 of the 360 degrees zodiac circle. And the amount of time it takes the sun to move through the 30 degrees we call tropical Capricorn is lesser than the amount of time it takes for the sun to move through the 30 degrees we call tropical Cancer. Now, the average amount of time for the sun to move through one of these signs. So this period of time that I like to call a sunth is 30.44 days. Just take the year, it's like 365.24 days, divided by 12. And you get basically 30 and a half. Interesting. So if you wanted to keep a 30 and a half day pace on a calendar, a very convenient way to do that would be alternating between months, or I prefer to call them sunths, of 30 and 31 days. You have 30, 31, 30, 31, 30, 31, and thereby keeping that 30 and a half day average pace. Now it's not 30.5, it's 30.44, so you have to do a little bit of extra kung fu. You wouldn't do that by taking one of these stunts and turning it into only 28 days. That might be a throwback to the moon, especially in the leap years where February has 29 days. Because 29, 28, these might be older periods of time that we would describe as months, especially 29. So let's talk about that. Now the month is in a way an astronomical thing, but it's not arbitrary. There's just many versions of what a month might be. I've already described a sunth, right? So just the sun traveling through a 12th part of the ecliptic circle, the sun traveling 30 degrees, and that's going to vary between 30 and 31 days throughout the course of the year. Well, what about a month? Well, depends on what you're speaking about. If you're looking at, right, here's Earth's directional zodiac. If you're just looking at the moon going through the signs, okay, so when the moon's at Earth's northern lean, that's the moon going home, 0 Cancer, right? Half a month later, the moon at 0 Capricorn. Actually, I wouldn't even call that a month, however. But this is the moon going through the lunar mansions, going through the nakshatras, going through the zodiac signs, which are not about the sky. They're about the earth, emanating from the heart of earth, aligned to earth's spine, to our world tree, to the sword of the stone. Okay, so every 27.321 days, the moon about the earth. Okay, and everything I'm speaking of, these will be average periods. There's always shift because orbits are not circular, they're elliptical, and some other interesting astronomical factors that we're learning much more about as we observe over great periods of time and generations. Yes? So, 27 and a third days, the moon through the signs. That would be one definition of a month. That's called, by the way, a tropical month. The moon from the Tropic of Cancer-ish back there. Why do I say ish? Because the moon is not glued to the sun's path, but rather snakes above and beneath the sun's path every month. Every draconic month, which is a period of about 27.2 something days. I'm forgetting the days in a draconic month. There's also, by the way, the anomalistic month. The moon has an elliptical path as well. So moon at like perigee, which is its closest approach to Earth, back to perigee. That's called the anomalistic month. That one's about 27.55 days. That's the one that's closest to 28, which, many would teach you is the length of a month. Why? Because 28 days is 4 weeks, right? Okay, so confused yet? We have the tropical month, the moon going through the signs. By the way, you could also look at the moon through sidereal signs. It's like moon at Pleiades, back to moon at Pleiades, a star month, also about 27.321 days. So sidereal month, tropical month are about the same. There's the draconic month, like moon at north node, back to moon at north node. The anomalistic month, which you could look in a chart as moon Lilith, back to moon Lilith. And then we have the synodic month. which is, I think, what most of us consider to be an astronomical month. And that's really about Earth, Moon, and Sun, because we're watching the moon reflect sunlight to our earthly eyes. And this is the month of phase. It's about 29 and a half days. 29.53059 and change, but who's counting? We are. I am. We have been for a very long time, and it's a little bit easier to get more precise now, not only because of our measuring devices, but because we now have decimals to play with, where back in the day it was only fractions, and that was a little bit more difficult. 29.53 is probably a good number to remember, but let's just say 29 and a half days. And that's the amount of time, roughly, between consecutive Earth, Moon, Sun alignments, right? So new moon, we call it these days, although really it's a no moon, because unless this is a solar eclipse and you happen to be on Earth where you're experiencing that shadow play, of course you cannot see the moon when the moon is in the flames under the beams of the sun. So every month the moon disappears for like 3 days and 3 nights, right? And when the moon is then reborn in the sunset west, the young moon, the Diana's bow, the sliver crescent, this would be like the astronomical, the visible new moon of the month, yes? And this, by the way, is why many of the old calendar systems began days at sunset. Because if you're wanting to align your calendar months with the phases of the moon, well, the first moon you see each month, the first moon you see after the moon has survived her monthly trial by fire, is in the sunset west. And then the next day, if you're looking from the northern hemisphere sky, the moon will be further from the sun and then further from the sun the next night, right? Sunset, sunset. And the moon for the waxing half of the month will move in the northern hemisphere sky from the right, the western horizon, towards the left, the eastern horizon, which is where the moon will be at sunset when the moon is opposite the sun, when you get the full O, right? Growing from that sliver smile, growing and growing and growing until we get the full O of full moon. Now, I believe this is why many of these calendar keepers also had language that reads from the right to the left, because from the northern hemisphere view, the moon will wax for about 2 weeks from the right to the left of the sky at sunset time. If you just go out every night, you get to see that. All right. Well, that period of time from new moon to full moon traditionally was called a fortnight, right? Because it's about 14 days. Now, it's not 14 days. We're going to get back to that. It's half of the lunation, half of the month of about 29 and a half days. This is just tricky stuff. But if you're working with aligning calendar months to this lunation period, to the month of phases, the synodic month, synod means meeting, like the moon meets the sun in Earth's zodiac every lunation, every month. Well, if you're working with a 29 and a half day period, the way you do that reasonably is to alternate your months between periods of 30 days and 29. See how February on leap years with this 29-day thing seems to be a throwback to that. Otherwise, the 28 might be 2 fortnights. It might also just be the result of needing to give Julius and Augustus both months of 31. It's kind of hard to say. But certainly 29 and 29 and a half, these are ancient periods of the moon, really alternating between months of 29 and 30 that go way, way, way back. Now, if you're doing that, it's pretty tricky. It's a tale for another time. It's something I often speak about, but 12 such months where you're alternating between 29 and 30, or 12 times 29 and a half, it's a period of only 354 days. So we call this the silver year. And of course, the issue there is it's 11 days shy of the golden year. And then you have to use a system of intercalary or leap months. And it's a tricky calendar kung fu. And I don't want to go there today because I want to talk about hours and days. All right, so we have the year, Earth orbiting the sun, that's the solar year, the tropical year. We have the month, but we've already talked about a sunth, a month of phases, right? So a sunth being about 30.44 days, the sun through a 12th part of the ecliptic circle or the zodiac sign. We have a month, a period of moon phases of about 29 and a half days or 29.53059. We have the anomalistic month of the moon getting close to Earth, far from Earth, and close again. And that's about 27.55 days. We have the tropical month, the moon getting about the Earth, going through Earth signs, about 27.321 days. We have the draconic month, the moon snaking north and south of the sun's path. It's like 27.2 something days. I can't quite remember. There's a lot of versions of months that are actually quite astronomical. So not arbitrary, but which one is right? Yeah, so many argue that there should be this 13-month calendar. That's what all the indigenous were doing. You'd actually find that too often if you're researching how people have kept time. We do see it in lunar mansion traditions, but typically, well, let me just leave that there. I think most of us, when we think about months, are really thinking about the phases of the moon. And during the course of the year, there are about 12 and a third lunations. So it's tricky stuff. Now, some have proposed just a very simple calendar where you have 13 months of 28 days. That equals 364 days. So you're pretty close to the year. But you're not with the year, and there's nothing astronomical about 28 days. It does find an average-ish between the tropical month, the moon through the signs, and the synodic month, the month of phases. But we don't want to take averages of those periods. We want to honor both of those periods. It does, however, also give you 28 days, 4 weeks. So what about a week? Is that an astronomical thing? Yes, but it's an approximation, right? So the moon in about a fortnight will move from new to full, from conjunct the sun to opposite the sun, especially if you're talking about the time when the moon first becomes visible, which is typically a day after new moon, until the moon is full. That's a period of about 14 days. And so it's about 14 days with the moon waxing or growing, and then about 14 days with the moon shrinking in phase or waning. Right? Moon going away from the sun, waxing, moon coming back to the light, waning. Those are periods each of about a fortnight, 14 days. And look, this is a very crucial period of time. If you're living way, way back in the day before street lights, you need to work with the light by night in the sky, and that's called the moon, and she's not available every day of the month, right? So the fortnight was it's like in our heart and soul. It's something that's like really important to reconnect to, and it's an estimate. So the fortnight likely is a result from waxing moon and waning moon. And maybe it's cutting that period in half where we get these 7-day weeks. 7-day weeks go way back though. And these 7 days named for the visible lights, the planetus, the wandering stars that we see traveling against the backdrop of the constellations, right? And so we know this: Sunday, sun, moon day, moon, Tuesday, Martes, Mars's day, miércoles, Wednesday, Mercury's day, Jueves, Thursday, Jupiter's day, Viernes, Venus's day, Friday, right? Sábado, Saturday, Saturn's day. So, right, so the 7 days. Now that period of a week, there's nothing really astronomical going on. But we do have this idea of like a magical time. And so today is Saturday, the day of Saturn. Tomorrow is Sunday, the day of the sun. Right? And interesting, that's kind of a local thing, because those of you who live in, I don't know, India will have sunrise tomorrow before I do. And, interestingly, in magical time, we have this period of time every day that's in disagreement um, in regards to the day of the week. Because in magical time, we begin days at sunrise, whereas, of course, in the modern clock construct, we begin days at midnight, right? But we actually don't. Because when are we beginning a calendar day? And the answer is at 12 a.m., which is this clock construct that has nothing to do with natural time, right? It's just an approximation of natural time, halfway in time between sunset and sunrise. In other words, the middle of the night. We find our way to midnight, right? The sun at the roots, the sun buried deep beneath the ground, the sun shifting from going down to coming back up, right? And the houses, the sun moving from the fourth house to the third, right? And there's a change in temperament, just as sunrise takes us from cold to warm, and sunset takes us from hot to cool. The sun at the roots takes us from cold and dry to cold and wet, and you can feel it in your bones. Just as midday takes us from cold and moist, and the dew is evaporated from hot and moist to hot and dry, right? And these things you can really feel in your bone. They're quite natural. They're very real. It's not just some construct. You hear this too often from so-called spiritual folk, right? That time is just an illusion and blah, blah, blah. Well, 9:53, 12 a.m. is a construct, no doubt, and the result of a human invention. And we might even ask that about, well, the 12ness of signs, etc., or the 24 hours in a day, which most of us divide each hour into 60 minutes, and 60 minutes into each minute has 60 seconds. Where does that come from? Well, one of the answers is the sexagesimal, the base 60 system out of Mesopotamian traditions. But interestingly, it's not something they were doing with time. And I just learned this quite recently, and obviously I'm a nerd about this stuff. Like, we didn't even divide hours into 60 minutes until pretty late in the game. Like, I'm talking like 14th, 15th century. All right. Before this, we were dividing space, like degrees of longitude or latitude, into divisions of 60 arc minutes, and the arc minutes into 60 arc seconds, right? That's actually an older um, system than dividing time in this way. We just didn't have the ability for that type of precision with time. And in a way, while it's really cool to have the dashes on the clock, you know what I mean, and be able to keep minutes and divide hours into shorter periods of time, it can also cause some confusion that takes us kind of away from natural time and causes a bit of a discord between, well, let's say planetary hours or magical hours and civil hours. And I want to spend some time with you there. Okay. But even like the 24, where does that come from? And there were many, many ancient systems: China, India, Egypt, the Chaldeans, the Babylonians. And we're using 12 hours of day and 12 hours of night. Like, what? Why? How does that work? And I would suggest the answer there is that creation creates in 12s. I want to open up a slideshow by that name that I often show. And fine, let me just take you here real quick. I've become convinced that the universe breathes like this. And so many of you will know this shape as the seed of life. It's a pattern we've seen all around the world throughout the ages because it's just what circles do. And anybody who's swept the compass quickly learns this truth. Here's actually 12, but we don't need to sweep 12 circles around the one. Actually, it's not natural to do so. It's natural for this. This is 6 circles around one, all of the same radius or diameter, right? The so-called seed of life pattern. In the seed of life, we find 2 6-petaled flowers. I've labeled here or colored here silver, so lunar, and golden, so solar, or 6-petaled flowers inside the inner circle and 6 outside. We get the inner and the outer signs. And so I'm moving the silver in this regard, moon-wise, and the golden sun-wise. And it reminds me I need to find where I've updated that because I made that move look cooler. But I just want to fill in the rest of the geometries here. And intriguingly, we get 24 unique spaces. So the 2 6-petaled flowers and then the other 6s here shown as red and kind of green blue, which I'm doing for an elemental truth. Can shade this in a very different way, by the way, and see the 7-ness of it all, which is 6 around 1, so maybe the days of the week. And for me, that's kind of quite an amazing thing. And though, that is drawn by a human tool, a compass, I would say it's quite a natural truth. And so interestingly, we get the 7 days of a week there. We get the 24 hours in a day there. And let me show you another way that the 24 hours work. Okay, so I'm going to take you to another one of these magical slideshows that I've created over time. This one, as you can see, called Magical Time, Planetary Days and Hours. And here's a look of one of these 7-pointed stars for the days of the week. I first learned about that, as many of us did, from this wonderful wooden book by John Martineau called A Little Book of Coincidence in the Solar System. It's a must. On the right, you can actually see different 7-pointed stars that take us through the use of the septagram or heptagram in different regards. These are all wooden books I really, really recommend for the study of nature and time and some of the different ways that we've worked with it over time. But there's so much to show from this, but I want to actually bring us here. Okay, so we're going to fill in this grid. Now, this is, as you can see, 24 hours for each of the days, right? In Sunday, the first hour of Sunday, we begin with the hour of the sun. All right. And then we go according to what's known as the Chaldean order. And you can think of it as the order of planetary speed. It takes the sun, of course, a year to get through the zodiac. It takes Venus and Mercury about a year as well, because they travel from Earth's point of view close to the sun. If you look at this over the average, a bunch of years, and it's sun takes more time to get around the 12 signs than Venus does. Mercury's lesser time. You can also just think of the sun moves about a degree per day. Venus can get up to about a degree and a quarter. Mercury can get up to more than 2 degrees a day in some cycles. Well, the moon's moving on average 13 degrees per day, right? And that's, of course, the fastest of these beings through the signs of the zodiac. Saturn, the slowest. So once we get fastest, we pop all the way out, right? Saturn, 29 and a half years to get around. Jupiter, about 12. Mars, about 2 years or 26 months. Okay. What's a month? Good question. All right. And then Mars, from Mars, we're going to come to the sun. And Venus, Mercury, Moon, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, like that. And look, there's 3 times through that so-called Chaldean order in 21 hours. Right? Well, we get 3 more. So what comes after Mars? Always the sun, then Venus, then Mercury. And then what happens? We go to Moon. Right? So see Sunday and Moon Day. All right. We're going to do that for the Moon as well. Same order, always the same order. And then you'll see that the 24th hour of Moon Day is Jupiter's hour. And what comes after Jupiter? Always Mars. Tuesday, Martes, Mars's day. All right, so we're going to go through there, and you'll just see how this order works. But it's interesting to see, for example, there's too much to say about everything that just popped up on the screen. But look at like how the 8th hour of each day is also a planetary hour that's in agreement with that day. The same is true for the 15th hour, right? And the same is true for the 22nd. Oh, of course, all the numbers after 7, after we've gone through the whole order through 7, 14, 21, right? There's a lot of very fascinating patterns that you'll find in this way that we do magical time. This is the image of the 12 hours of day and the 12 hours of night. But, very importantly, just see that we would need 24 hours. Or, by the way, it could also be 17 hours. Let me go back. Or it could be 10 hours, or I guess only 4 hours, 3 hours a day. That would set us up in such a way that Sunday is followed by Moon Day, is followed by Mars's day, Mercury's day, right? Like I need to go through the 7 and then another 3 so that I'm set up to follow my hours with the hour of the moon. I mean, that's interesting, right? We could have like 10 hours a day and still go from Sunday to Moon Day to Mars Day, right? And, many I think would really appreciate that because, most of us were taught that we count in tens because the human design is 10 fingers, right? Well, you can also take your thumb and count the pads on your fingers and just go Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, right? Anywhere 12. And then you get to see 4 3s and 3 4s and all sorts of interesting things. By the way, if you count the 2 pads on the thumb, you get 14. So there's your fortnight waxing and the fortnight waning with the full moon in between, right? There's so much to find in the human design. But importantly, this 24, which is something we see all over the world, actually including the way that the Chinese solar calendar works, it's 24 divisions of 15 degrees of space, dividing the ecliptic circle, the sun's path, into 24 degrees or divisions of 15 degrees of so-called solar terms. 24 shows up in some really interesting ways. Now, the hour, it is arbitrary, though. It is a construct. There's nothing astronomical to the hour besides it's a 24th of the day. Or is it? Okay, and so this is a really important thing that in magical time or planetary time, we don't divide hours into 60 minutes. We don't divide the day into 24 equal periods. We divide daylight into 12 equal periods and night into 12 equal periods, and those only the same twice a year around the equinox time. So in the fall and the winter time, when night is longer than day, then the night hours are longer than day hours. In other words, they'd be longer than 60 minutes, and the daylight hours would be shorter than 60 minutes, right? In the spring and the summertime, when there's more daylight than there is night, the day hours are longer than 60 minutes, and the night hours are shorter than 60 minutes. And that becomes kind of a confusing thing. But once you reconnect with it, and these days it can, in a way, be really easy because you can get many different, like phone apps, for example, like planetary hours apps. Um, but that's still like looking at an app does not align you with nature. It can give you a tool to help you do this, right? But the sundial, like that's a really wonderful way to align with so-called planetary hours or non-civil hours. But of course, you can only work with the sundial by day. At nighttime, we either have to work with stars or we used to work with water clocks. Or more rudimentally, candle clocks, like how long it takes a standard length of candle, standard diameter of candle to burn. Incense sticks were used in this way. Well, look, candles, although not precise, incense and water clocks, much more precise, especially with the advancements of water clocks. How long does it take to empty this bowl and fill it up again? Things like that. Well, that is civil time, right? Your goal is to get each hour, quote unquote, in that regard, to be the same length of minutes, quote unquote. You don't have to divide it that way, right? But we're talking about like standard periods of time that wouldn't be magical time or planetary hours, right? Daylight longer in the spring and summer than night, right? Nighttime longer in the fall and winter than day. Okay, well, let me just do one final thing here. We're going to go to timeanddate.com, which is a wonderful place online. While you're here, by the way, I really suggest you get over here and play with their sun, moon, and space calendar. You can drop down. I don't know it's kind of flailing on me. Sorry. Hello. How annoying is that? So maybe, well, we can do eclipses, okay? So I can type in, let me type in San Francisco, for example. And then it will show me like the eclipse coming up actually in San Francisco on the calendar. It's March 13th, not the 14th. It will actually take us from one of these calendar dates to the other because this is working with the modern convention of changing the calendar at 12 a.m., which is not quite midnight. But anyway, like a really wonderful resource that this website provides is an opportunity to kind of see animations of what the eclipse looks like and the timings of the eclipse. So when do I need to wake up the lad in this house to see this total lunar eclipse that's very significantly aligned in his own chart, or should I let him sleep? Questions like that. All right. Anyway, I will be offering an eclipse special, by the way. So be on my mailing list if you want to hear more about that. GeminiBrett.com to sign up. Okay, well, this website also offers this really wonderful sun calendar, twilight, dawn, and dusk times. And so, I'm just used to these drop downs working as I navigate this place. So maybe I'm not going to be able to get there. You can feel my frustration. Please work. Let's try a different browser. Let me open up Safari and see if it will work there. Come join me on the World Wide Web. that's interesting. I've never seen any of this stuff happening at this website. Well, what I had hoped to show you, let's see if this works. Their sun calculator. Huh. Well, folks, I had a plan. Let me try to dig this up maybe without sharing the screen and see if that somehow works. You know what it does. Da 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 da. What I want is sunrise and sunset times. Okay, I'm almost there. Great. Where are y'all? Over here. Buttons, 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 buttons. Okay, so let's... Now, my question is, are you able to see this on your screen? Let me do that in a different way, just so I can be more sure. Oh, just flailing. Okay, here we go. You can hear Maya outside. Speaking of the light. Okay, great. So check this out. Let me go back to February, or let's go to December, or let's just start at January. So obviously in Northern Hemisphere, well, why not all the way to December? We're going to find, like in clock time, on December 21st at the Capricorn solstice, when Earth's south pole is leaning towards the sun, so maximum shadow in Northern Hemisphere places like San Francisco, which this table is created for, we're going to get our shortest day, right? So you can see day length here is only 9.5 hours long. It's showing us that it's a second less than the day before. All right, the next day it's 4 seconds greater, or they say 3, and then 7 seconds greater the next day, and 10 seconds, right? And you can just see like the change in sunrise time might actually feel like it's not agreeing with this. Well, this sunset time is changing as well, which you'd also notice over here, solar noon, which we might expect to be around 12 p.m. Well, that did happen in the San Francisco clocks on December 4th and 5th. But then notice the deviation, right? Because clock time is just an approximation for natural time. Well, let's get into January. And we're going to see, of course, the Northern Hemisphere days growing longer each day. And you can start seeing they're really kind of picking up the pace in the transition, or the difference from one day to the next. Look at like midday time, and we're really starting to deviate from 12 on the clock, aren't we? Right? What about sunrise and sunset times? Like, kind of interesting to see what's happening there, but sunrise is getting earlier and earlier and earlier. Go through February, and of course those trends continue. And this is just a very natural experience of the seasons, right? And so, I mean, an interesting thing to consider is, like, when does the sun hit the midheaven in the shortest shadow of the day? And that shows up on the sundial, and how we're kind of deviating from clock time. Well, it's interesting to see that it's like February 22nd where we get this peak, and then it starts heading back towards 12 p.m. on the clock. I'm kind of intrigued by that. I actually haven't noticed that pattern before. But look at how everything just gets crazy wonky, right? Oh, where would it be? Here, right? Where it goes from 12:20 p.m. for midday today, March 8th, and then tomorrow 1:20 p.m. What the heck? Daylight's losing crime, where we go from sunrise, which has been getting earlier and earlier every day, to suddenly it's an hour later. What? And sunset, which has been getting later and later every day as the days are growing longer and we're heading towards equinox, to suddenly it's an hour later. What? Because this thing is a mess. So I haven't found the source, and maybe it's allegorical, but supposedly there was a native wise one who once said, only the white man believes he can cut the end off the blanket, sew it to the other end of the blanket, and believe he has a longer blanket, right? In response to daylight savings crime, which I like to call it daylight losings crime. And you should know it was once called wartime. And hopefully that inspires us to resist it all. And we still have to make the Zoom meeting. And for those of you in constellations, by the way, do please know that if your clocks aren't changing, mine did. So tomorrow's introduction to astro mapping class will be at my 9 a.m., which is different than today's 9 a.m. because what the... All right. If you don't know about constellations, learn about constellation. It'd be a great time to sign up. $16 a month for all sorts of amazing classes, one a week. I teach once a month, and tomorrow I am teaching Introduction to Astro Mapping Techniques. So you could join for $16 right now, leave anytime, and get an awesome class tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific, whatever that means, on Sunday, whatever that means, March, whatever that means, 9th. All right, I hope to see you there, GeminiBrett.com, and you can just click the community tab to learn more about constellations. Make sure you sign up for my mailing list so I can send you the eclipse special I'm about to run, probably starting with the eclipse on Thursday, and we'll run it for a month. And also, if you're on my mailing list, you'll get to know when my coming class, which begins at equinox, East Equinox time, and that is a real thing, March, what is that, 20th, 2025 at Synchronicity University. I'll be teaching a 5-week course, Cosmic Keys of the Heavenly Houses. That's going to be amazing. Enrollment is currently closed, but it will, I understand, open up for another short period of time. And I would love to be able to notify you exactly when that is, so you can join me there for an amazing journey through time, space, sacred geometry, psychology, philosophy, and so much more. All right, thanks for taking this tour of time and space with me here today. It's been just about an hour. What's an hour? See you in space, friends. Happy daylight losing crime to you.